Welcome back to Golden and Blued, everybody. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. This channel is home of at least one college football or college basketball video every single day. Don't forget to check out my Patreon page. We have a wider selection, and if you want to be a part of my I Am Golden and Blued or We Are Golden and Blued video that I'm doing for my subscribers, please send your short 4 or 5 second video clip saying I Am Golden and Blued or We Are Golden and Blued to my email. I'll leave my email address in the description of this video. I wanted to talk about roles being reversed, meaning this year I think Alabama will dominate just like Georgia dominated in 2021. I predicted Alabama to have a slight step back year last year, which they did. I mean, they made the national championship, but they didn't win it. I didn't expect them to get to the playoffs, to be honest with you. And they were one game away from missing the playoffs, except Georgia laid down for Alabama. Yes, I am sticking to that story. That's the only thing that makes sense for that game. Now, in 2022, I think the roles are going to be reversed. I think Alabama will be the dominating team, not only in the SEC, but in the entire nation. Alabama will be the team to beat, period. The question is, will they do for Georgia what Georgia did for them? Now, if you look at the 2021 season, Georgia was the best team in the nation. There's no doubt about it. Georgia averaged 38.6 points per game. That's 9th in the nation. Alabama was a tad better. They averaged 39.9 points per game. That's 6th in the nation, but that's not by much. On defense, that's where the difference was. Georgia allowed 10.2 points per game. That's 1st. And Alabama allowed 20.1 points per game. That's 18th. That's a good defense, but that's allowing double what Georgia allowed. Georgia went 10-5 versus the spread, and Alabama went 8-6. And they did have common opponents. They both played Arkansas. Georgia was a 16.5 point favorite, and they beat Arkansas like a drum, 37-0. Didn't allow them to score one single point. Alabama was actually a bigger favorite against Arkansas, 20.5 point favorite, and they barely beat them, 42-35, only by a touchdown. Arkansas scared Alabama. The next common opponent, Auburn. Georgia was a 14.5 point favorite, easily covered that, beat them 34-10. Then, of course, for Alabama, they were a 20.5 point favorite. So they were a bigger favorite in that game as well, and they escaped Auburn 24-22 in 4 overtimes. And Auburn had that game won up until the last few minutes of the 4th quarter. Another common opponent was Tennessee. Georgia was a 19.5 point favorite. They beat them 41-17, covered. Alabama was a 25.5 point favorite. So once again, a bigger favorite. But this time they actually covered and beat Tennessee 52-24. Then the last common opponent, Florida. Of course, Georgia gets Florida at a neutral site every year in Jacksonville. Georgia was a 14 point favorite, covered that easily, whooped Florida 34-7. Alabama had to go to Florida. They were a 14 point favorite, did not cover, escaped against Florida 31-29. It came down to a missed 2 point conversion. So Georgia was dominating their regular season. I mean, absolute domination. And Alabama was barely winning, either not covering, escaping, or downright losing. Like I mentioned, they escaped against Florida on the road, 31-29. Tennessee was in that ball game up until the 4th quarter. Alabama did pull away towards the end of the game and won 52-24. Alabama also barely beat LSU, 20-14. They were a 29 point favorite in that game, and LSU had the ball. Had they made that Hail Mary and kicked the extra point, LSU would have won that game. Arkansas, I mentioned it earlier, barely escaped against them, 42-35. They were 20.5 point favorite. Same thing with Auburn, 20.5 point favorite. Escaped 4 overtimes, 24-22. So I say one game away from missing the playoffs, but if you look at all these close calls, they were like 4 or 5 games away from missing the playoffs. Can't forget about the loss to Texas A&M. They were an 18.5 point favorite, and they lose 41-38. And that's why I said before, I'm saying it again, and I'll say it forever. Georgia laid down for Alabama in the SEC championship. Then we look at the playoffs, and Georgia picked up where they left off right before the SEC championship. Sheer domination again. They were 7.5 point favorite against Michigan in the playoffs. Beat them like a drum, 34-11. Then, of course, in the national championship, 2.5 point favorite, mopped the floor with Alabama 33-18. And I know I still hear, we'll go to Blue. That was a close game even into the 4th quarter. That pick 6 was the difference. That's how Georgia won games. I mean, they had a decent offense, but Georgia won football games by that dominating defense. This year, I think the roles will be reversed. I think Alabama will have one of the best defenses in the nation, the best offense in the nation. they'll probably average over 40 points a game. I'm telling you right now, Bryce Young might be a back-to-back Heisman Trophy winner. So let's take a look at their schedule. See who has a tougher schedule this year. First, Georgia. Well, they get Oregon at a neutral site. They say neutral, but it's in Atlanta, so there's going to be more Georgia fans there, let's face it. After that, they get Samford. On the road to South Carolina. I'm warning Georgia fans right now, that has upset written all over it. I think South Carolina is capable of beating Georgia. Right now, I'm on the fence. I'll do my preseason prediction videos both for Georgia and South Carolina. But I'm telling you right now, South Carolina could beat Georgia in Columbia. After that, Kent State. Then a road trip to Missouri. Not worried about that. They get Auburn at home. That helps. Vanderbilt at home. Of course, Florida in Jacksonville. I don't think Florida's going to be all that much better this next year. Tennessee, but it's at home. That also will help Georgia. They have to go on the road to Mississippi State. That's a tricky road trip. And then right after that, another tricky road trip to Kentucky. I do think Kentucky won't be as good as what they were last year, but that's still going to be a tough road trip. And then a home game against Georgia Tech. So I'm thinking a one-loss season for Georgia heading into the SEC Championship. And that's if they don't get upset again in the regular season. Now let's look at Alabama's schedule for 2022. They get Utah State at home, at Texas. I know that game is going to be built up, but I don't think Alabama will have any issues whatsoever against Texas. I think they'll beat them by 3 touchdowns, something like that. Then they get UL Monroe at home. Then they get Vanderbilt at home. On the road to Arkansas could be tricky, but as good as I think Alabama will be, I don't think that's going to be an issue. They get Texas A&M at home. That's going to be a revenge game, and Nick Saban will hold nothing back on that. After that, on the road to Tennessee, as good as Alabama's going to be, once again, I don't think that's going to be a scary road trip at all. Then they get Mississippi State at home. At LSU, that is a tough place to win, but I'm sticking to my guns. I think Alabama's going to be so good that's not going to matter. After that, at Ole Miss. Now, that's a little tricky because you're coming off an emotional win at LSU because I do think they win at LSU. Then you got to go on the road to Ole Miss. But I'm hanging my hat on talent, and Alabama will be the better team. I think they're going to win that game as well. Then Austin Peay for another tune-up game. Then another revenge game. I say revenge. I know they didn't lose to Auburn, but Auburn did scare them. And I think this year Alabama will humiliate Auburn. So, yeah. Alabama could be looking at undefeated, and Georgia with the one loss, roles reversed. If Georgia loses the SEC Championship, they're out of the playoffs. So the question is, will Alabama return the favor for Georgia because Georgia laid down for Alabama to get into the playoffs last year? Will they do it for Georgia to get Georgia into the playoffs? I'm not so sure about that because Nick Saban doesn't like to lose even when the team is actually better than him. If his team is better, he's not going to want to lay down. So don't put any faith in Nick Saban, Georgia fans, that Alabama is going to return the favor and lay down for you to get you into the playoffs. I just don't see that happening. And that's exactly how I see this thing playing out. Georgia going into the SEC Championship with one loss. Alabama going into the SEC Championship undefeated. If Georgia loses, they're out. So your playoff hopes will rest on Alabama returning the favor, lay down for you, and get you into the playoffs. I don't see that going well for you, Georgia. I just don't. And I'm not saying you're going to be a bad team. I just don't think you're going to be elite like you were this year. Y'all let me know in the comments section. Do you think Alabama will return the favor for Georgia, lay down for them in the SEC Championship to bring them into the playoffs with them like Georgia did for Alabama last year? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.